Raise your hand if you've ever spent 3 hours staring at a textbook, highlighted half the page in yellow, and then realized you couldn't recall a single sentence you just read. Yeah, same. Or maybe you watched 6 hours of coding tutorials, felt like an absolute genius while watching them, and then opened a blank code editor only to freeze completely because you had no idea where to start. Here's the brutal truth. Most people are completely terrible at learning. Not because they aren't smart enough, and not because they lack the genetics for it. They're terrible at learning because school taught them a broken system. School trained you to sit quietly, absorb input passively, memorize facts for a test on Friday morning, and then dump all that information out of your brain the second the bell rang. That isn't learning. That's temporary storage. Real learning is about understanding, applying, and retaining information so deeply that it becomes second nature. Fast learning is surprisingly simple. Here's why. The fundamental flaw in how most people approach any new skill is that they treat their brain like a passive sponge instead of an active muscle. You read a chapter, you listen to a lecture, you watch a video, and because it feels familiar when you look at it, your brain tricks you into believing you've actually mastered it. Psychologists call this the illusion of competence. Recognizing a concept when it's sitting right in front of your eyes is not the same as being able to produce it from your own head. Passive consumption feels good because it's easy and comfortable. But comfort is the exact opposite of where learning happens. Real learning is a contact sport. It requires output. If you want to learn any subject or skill 3 times faster than everyone else, you have to invert your entire input to output ratio. The average person spends 80% of their time consuming information and 20%, if they're lucky, trying to use it. You need to flip that completely on its head. Spend 20% of your time absorbing the absolute core principles, and spend 80% of your time actively practicing, testing yourself, and building. This brings us to the first core principle, the Pareto Principle, or the 80-20 rule. In almost every domain in existence, 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. When you jump into a massive new subject, don't try to consume everything at once. Identify the vital 20% first. If you want to learn a new language, don't waste months trying to memorize 10,000 obscure words from a dictionary. Learn the top 1,000 most commonly used words first. Those 1,000 words make up roughly 80% of everyday spoken conversations. Once you have those down, you can actually speak and understand the language in real time. If you want to learn guitar, don't spend weeks grinding complex music theory before touching the strings. Learn the 4 basic open chords that make up 80% of all popular songs on the radio. Play real songs on day 1. Once you master the foundational 20%, everything else has a logical framework to attach itself to. Now, once you've isolated those core concepts, how do you lock them into your brain permanently? You use a method called active recall. Active recall is the process of forcing your brain to retrieve information from memory without looking at the answer. Passive review, like reading your notes over and over, is like looking at a dumbbell on the floor and expecting your arms to get bigger. Active recall is actually picking the dumbbell up and doing the rep. Here is what it looks like in practice. Read a section of a book once. Then, close the book completely. Take out a blank sheet of paper and write down every single idea, concept, and detail you can remember from what you just read. At first, your mind will go blank. It will feel frustrating, uncomfortable, and mentally draining. That exact feeling of friction and mental effort is the sound of your brain creating new neural pathways. The harder your brain has to work to pull information out, the stronger the memory connection becomes. Once you've squeezed your brain for everything it has, open the book again, check what you missed, fill in the gaps, and repeat the process. If you're preparing for an exam or learning a technical skill, stop rereading chapters and start doing practice questions immediately. The next critical pillar is the spacing effect. Stop pulling all-nighters. Cramming for 10 hours straight the night before, a deadline feels productive because you're forcing a massive wave of information into your short-term memory. But short-term memory is temporary storage. Within 48 hours, almost all of that information evaporates. Your brain needs time and rest to consolidate memories. Memory consolidation happens primarily during deep sleep, where your brain organizes the day's experiences and transfers key information into long-term storage. Studying for 45 minutes a day across 6 days is exponentially more effective than studying for 6 hours in a single night. You didn't just pass the test or finish the course, you actually owned the skill.